Good evening and welcome to the 2018 Ashland Candidates Forum. My name is Adam Schuster. I'm Ashland's elected town moderator, and I'm honored to be serving as the moderator of tonight's event, which is again being sponsored by the group We Love Ashland, along with the Friends of the Ashland Public Library. Without the hard work and dedication of these groups, tonight's forum would not be possible. Tonight's event is being recorded by WACA-TV for future rebroadcast. I join the sponsors in thanking WACA for providing this service. We're here this evening to hear from many of the candidates running for offices in the Ashland Town election on May 15th. What people don't often realize is that the results of municipal elections have more of a direct impact on our daily lives than the results of either state or federal elections. Despite this importance, in a town the size of Ashland, we don't have a lot of media coverage of our elections. So this is one of the few opportunities residents will have to learn about the candidates. It's also a chance for voters to hear directly from the candidates in their own words, rather than having their words and message filtered or interpreted by someone else. The candidates should be recognized and thanked for their willingness to volunteer their time and service to Ashland's residents. So thank you. But it doesn't require running for office to have an impact. Each and every Ashland resident has an ability to have a direct impact on Ashland's future by serving on one of the many appointed or volunteer boards and committees that do so much of the work in town. In a town like Ashland, the importance of local participation can't be overstated. There's definitely something for everyone, and I encourage everyone here this evening or sees this on TV to find a way they can contribute their specific talents. Before I go through the format of the evening and the schedule, I'd like to remind everyone, as I was asked to remind everyone, the candidates in the audience, that we'll be engaging in civil debate this evening. Looks like a pretty rowdy crowd, so I'm not sure. I might need like something up here. There will be two separate segments in tonight's program. The first segment will feature candidates for library trustee, assessor, housing authority, and board of health. Sorry, the housing authority candidate is unable to be with us this evening, who are all running unopposed for their seats. The second segment will feature candidates for contested seats on the planning board and the board of selectmen, as well as unopposed candidates for the school committee. Both segments will begin with each candidate having 2 minutes to provide an opening statement. That will be followed by a series of questions. Candidates will each have 60 seconds to respond to a question. Where appropriate, I have the ability to grant candidates a 30-second rebuttal. Questions for the first group will be the same for all candidates, while some of the questions for the second group will be specific to the candidate running for a specific board or committee. Following the questions that I pose, we will have time for questions from the public. We'll end each segment with a 1-minute closing statement from each candidate. And as I explained to the candidates earlier, the order will be reversed for closing statements, and the order is not quite random, but it's been changed up so no one's answering the same question first. Tonight's schedule and format were established by the sponsors and provided to the candidates ahead of time. Some of tonight's questions came from a lengthy list of questions I was provided by the sponsors. Some of the questions are mine, and still others came from other sources. The choice of which question to ask was mine, and I have not provided the questions in advance to anyone. With that, let's begin. Let me start by introducing the candidates with us this evening. Carol Ambacher, candidate for an incumbent running for re-election to library trustee. Lorne Bullerwell, also library trustee, is running for re-election. Chris Daniele, running for the Board of Health. Steve Greenberg, running for re-election to the Board of Assessors. And KG Narayana, running for the Board of Health for re-election. Opening statements. It turned out I was wrong. This is the order of opening statements.
A, B, D.
Well, I went alphabetical, and so did Kathy. So, Carol.
I've been on the board since 2005. I got on the library board when there was a vacancy. Someone had moved out of state, and I said, sure, I'll fill in. And once I got on the board and saw the library director, Paula Benetti, and the kinds of things she did, and her management style, and the hope she had for the future, for the new library. We were stuck over on Chestnut Street on a little building for a while this place was being built. The more I saw of this library and the way she ran it and what she wanted to do, the more I thought I'd like to be associated with it. So I ran. And then 3 years later I ran again, and 3 years later again, and now I'm running for the 4th time. And the reasons stay the same. But in those years, I have seen such change in this library, such growth. It's a place for everyone. I think of the senior center for seniors and the fields for the kids and all of that. I think of this place as a place for anyone in town for a whole host of interest, and the town's support has been fabulous. So that's why I'm running.
Thank you,
Less
Carol.
than 2 minutes?
Unless you saw a little sign over there, I mean, yes. Lorne.
Hi, my name is Lorne Bullowell. This is my first time running for re-election. I have had a somewhat long history of loving libraries, starting from back when I was a kid. So when the chance opened up for election to run for the Board of Trustees for the library, I jumped at the chance. And it's turned out to be a very good thing. It's a good group of people. I enjoy being with them. I love the progress that's gone on with the library, from being part-time library kind of thing to pretty close to full-time, at least we will be in July. Again, Paula is terrific, the staff is terrific, and I just love being around the library. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Daniele. I am running for a seat on the Board of Health. I've lived in the town of Ashland for what will be 16 years come August, and I've grown to love this town. I never really got very active or involved in the town for quite a long time, and I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was probably around the time of the last override. I did a lot of talking and not enough listening, and as a result, I was wrong about a lot of things. Not that my opinion didn't matter, but there were things that I was overlooking. And a couple of very important people. I've had a lot of inspiration and mentors, but Steve Mitchell from the current Board of Selectmen and Mike Herbert, they came and they were willing to listen to me and to talk to me. And since that time, I became a better listener. I opened up my ears and I learned that saying that they talk, I don't know how it goes. It's said in a number of ways, but it makes a lot of sense. There are 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So I've spent a lot more time listening to the people, to the people who run the town, to the people that live in the town, to my neighbors, about what's important, and thinking about what's important to me as a citizen, as a neighbor as well. So I started getting a little bit more involved, going to the farmers market a lot and volunteering at the farmers market now over the last couple of years, going to and listening to Board of Health meetings and Board of Selectmen meetings and all of the different things. And then observing over the last few years, I learned a lot about how people got along despite differing opinions. And that wasn't the case on the Board of Health. And there were issues that are just too important to not get along. And I've been lucky to serve as an appointed member for the last few months, and I want to continue and get the work done that the people feel are important as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Steve?
Thank you, Adam. First of all, I'd like to thank the Friends of the Library for putting this together, and thank Adam for being the moderator this evening, and thanks to all those in the audience for showing up here this evening. I was first appointed to the Board of Assessors a while back. There was a vacancy, and then I ran for the office unopposed. I'm running for this term unopposed. That's unfortunate. I wish there were more folks involved. It'd be good to have more of a debate than just talking about who we are and what we do, but this is the state we're in. But I'm looking forward to another term as an assessor for the town of Ashland. I enjoy it. We get the work, we do the work, and we go home. So it's rewarding in that way, and it's an interesting way to see the town's growth and what's been going on. But it's something I enjoy, and I hope folks will vote for me for this position. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Kechi?
Adam, thank you. And thanks to the organizers, Friends of Library, as well as the We Love Ashland, for organizing this event. I came to this town in 2001 and accidentally bumped onto the TV channel where the WACA-TV was showing one day, and then I heard the selectmen's meeting that there was a need for volunteers on the Cultural Council. So I just filed my application as a volunteer bank, and then I was selected through the efforts of other members who were on the Board of Selectmen, and spent 2 terms over there. And then later on I was asked to see whether I could look into other committees, and then I got onto the Conservation Commission, Charter Review, as well as contested for the Board of Health. This is my 2nd term that I'm contesting. And I do hold a PhD in physics, and I do do a lot of data analysis for getting some results out, and I think through data as my basis to work on, and I also use my reasonings to make sure the data is properly applied to the betterment of the town. I also bring perseverance, patience, and I know that progress comes out of these two. Thank you.
Thank you, KG. Thank you, all of you. Now for the hard probing questions. And remember, you'll all get the same question. Being a board member means being part of a team of individuals who together make stronger, more effective decisions. What experiences have you had as part of a team where success was achieved because of that teamwork? And each of you will get a minute to respond. First up is Steve.
Thank you. The first team I was on, and remember my last name is Greenberg, but I think the first team I was on was St. George's Church in Framingham, CYO basketball. Right from there to the CYO swim team. But, you know, sports through high school and college. But I think the best teams that I've been involved in have been right here in town. I've served on a number of other committees. This is the first elected board that I've participated in. And, you know, it's a democratic process, and it's okay to abstain. It's okay to go against what your fellow board members might be thinking if you think strongly or passionately differently, but it's important to get the job done.
Thank you. Chris, you're up next.
Thank you. For the last 20 years, I've worked at Mass Bay Community College, and I've done a lot of committee work, which requires teams and team decision-making. But probably the most prolific experience I had was being a part of the search committee for the rector at my church. Before we did that, the consultant to the search committee got us together and discussed something called a consensus model. And what I thought was really interesting about it was it encourages people who have different viewpoints and different opinions to discuss them freely, openly, and in a safe environment, and together find common ground and work from the common ground, and then try and understand each other's differences.
Thank you. Next up is KG.
Prior to getting to the town volunteering here, I had been a volunteer for the local temple here for 15 years. And I worked with the board members there, as well as the working with the town for the temple's needs with respect to the sewer connection, other things. I had spent a lot of time with the town. So I know the administration side of it by looking at how they work on the other side, and I comply with the regulations as needed by the town. And beyond that, I've also worked in the Cultural Council. We have had a healthy working relationship with the other members as a team, and we go with the team decision rather than individual views at that point, even though you differ sometimes. And I've worked with the current Board of Health to make progress in changing the forms to suit and collect more data for the food application forms, which I intend to move forward with putting it on the web and then making it digitized with other members. Thank you.
I think that means that it's dark. The dark has fallen outside.
Spring.
That was fairly inoffensive. Lorne.
I guess I'd mirror actually my two colleagues here to the left a little bit. I actually started basketball teams for the Police Athletic Association when I was young. And I was the director of science at the Dedham Public Schools. So in both cases, we worked on developing team approaches to things. It just works better if you can get everybody involved and everybody behind the same goal kind of thing out of it. And that's what I've discovered working on numerous kinds of committees and numerous boards throughout the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorne. And that means, Carol, you have the final word on this question.
My career was at AT&T, and with a company like that, you have lots of team building training, and you run into lots of problems and differences. But I have to say, since I've been on this board, I have never experienced a problem with the board for any decisions that we had to make. Some of the people have been on the board longer than I have. Some, like Lorne, are more recent, and Bonnie Mitchell. But Paula brings us whatever problems or decisions we have to vote on. We have good discussion. I don't think we've ever had an argument. We are a board that agrees, and so that's a very different experience from my work experience, and that's really very pleasant. This is a board of 5 members, just 5. So a nice board to be on, a good way to support a part of the town.
Thank you, Carol. Anyone rebuttal of any kind?
We should have Carol start.
Lorne?
I've got to bring it up. We had a disagreement over horns on Ferdinand the Bull statue out there.
Oh, jeez.
Being a biology teacher, I thought Ferdinand should have bigger horns than that, but
If only the comments next week at town meeting were going to be like that. All right, next question.
For the second group.
Topical knowledge and experience can be a big benefit when discussing, debating, and making decisions. In this changing world, how do you plan to stay aware of current happenings in the industries related to the board? And first up for this is KG.
Yes. I do read through a lot of paperwork and I analyze data, and that's one way to learn more things about and attending conferences and the educational committees that we are on through the Mass Health Association Board. That's what we go through it. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol?
Can you repeat the question? Adam?
Absolutely. The short version, in this changing world, how do you plan to stay aware of current happenings in the industries related to the board? So in the library, field of the library.
Well, I think of technology. Money plays into that in terms of what technology can do for the library. But just in this room, this screen was new last year. We had a donor that donated a considerable sum of money to the library on his death. And so we were able to buy new AV equipment for this room, which is pretty heavily used. And that meant some research, especially on the part of Carolyn Bell, who runs the Friday night movies, to come up with the kind of equipment that would sustain us through all these Friday nights. And the readers that people can take out, the Kindles. You know, we were right on with that when it was time to make those decisions. We made those decisions to purchase them. So you keep your eyes and ears open for what's going on in the world and see how it applies to you.
Carol, thank you very much. Lorne?
I depend upon, again, a lot of reading through internet kind of things, but there are also some groups, the Massachusetts Library Commission being one of them. And okay.
Next week, I'm taking that from you.
And there's a couple of other groups of committees or commissions that relate to trustees, and so we have a lot of swapping that goes around, a lot of information like that follows.
Thank you, Lorne. Steve?
Well, I guess my experience relative to work and being on the Board of Assessors, I started in commercial real estate back in 1985 and went from there to work for the federal government, bank failures back in the 90s, and I've owned my own real estate company here in town for the difference in those 33 years, whatever that number is. But the assessors works basically with real estate values and personal property. So I own personal property and I work in real estate, so I think I have a fair amount of experience in those two important items relative to being an assessor.
Thank you. And that means, Chris, you get the last word.
Thanks. At Mass Bay Community College, where I work, the cornerstone programs are the health sciences programs. So I have a wealth of resources in terms of medical professionals and library resources at my disposal, which I'm not afraid to use. Also, I'm a technology professional, so I have access to whatever's available on the internet. And what I've learned from being on the Board of Health these past few months, since I've been appointed, is there's a tremendous amount of resources provided to us. We get tons of emails. I think I've gotten something like 2,000 emails in these 7 weeks I've been on the Board of Health. And so learning how to filter through the important information and using that to help us do the work on the board will be a value.
Thank you, Chris. Rebuttals? Next question. What's most important to you about being on this particular board? And Chris, you get to start us off.
I think the most important thing for me is public health is something that's important from a human perspective. It's this whole, right now, this piece of it, the politics piece where you have to run for office and being involved in an election it's a little uncomfortable for me. It's out of my box. I spoke to the president of the college today, and he said, sometimes you have to step out of your box to get back into it. And he says, you'll be fine. So it's nice to have his vote of confidence. But public health to me, one of the people a while back when I first talked about being on the Board of Health was someone said, are you running as a Democrat or a Republican? I said, I'm running as a human. I said, if someone were in a restaurant and they were choking and I knew how to save them, I would do that. I wouldn't first ask how they voted. So I just want to give back to the people what they expect from a member of the Board of Health.
Thank you, Chris. KG.
Yes. The best thing is to be part of the board and then bring the patience and perseverance that's needed to work on items that I would bring positively to the board. And working with the others in order to progress further is very important because Board of Health has varied responsibilities, which is one of the oldest boards in this town, and Massachusetts was the one leader in the Board of Health progress here. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve,
I'd ask you to repeat the question if you don't mind.
what's most important to you about being on this particular board?
I've always enjoyed participating in some of the town's boards, needs, whatever. I don't want to go home and watch TV at night. I'd like to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I don't want to just express what I want to be done. I want to be part of what might be needed to be done. So I think I do it for selfish reasons, but I think those are positive selfish reasons.
Thank you, Steve. Lorne.
Well, I have to go home and watch WACA-TV every night. What I enjoy about the being on the board is that it helps the library. Books and libraries are windows of opportunity, and I enjoy being able, in some small way, to be able to make them more available for people so that they can actually realize some of their dreams. Thank you.
Okay. And I'll go with no rebuttals on that one. A very agreeable group. I'm going to ask different questions of those running for the first time and those running for re-election, and please bear with me. When I wrote this, there were going to be more than one person who was running for the first time, so you'll forgive me. Incumbents first, so everybody except you, Chris. You're running for re-election. Tell us about one thing you wish the board had accomplished during your current term, but didn't, and how you hope to accomplish it during your next term. And we're going to start with Carol.
Whoa. I'm hard put to think of that. I think one of the things that's going to happen, all credit due to our town manager and the citizens, will be to extend the hours of the library on Mondays. For several years, through the recession, we cut back drastically and didn't have the hour requirement that the state holds us to give us the full expenditure coming from the state, a full source of income. And so I'd say getting those extra hours so that we get the full complement of money, is probably one of the most important things right now, but the real credit for it will go to the town for voting for it and the town manager.
Thank you, Carol. KG?
As I said, that I've been working on the food application form. I'd like to get that on a digital form and then save the time for the town and then get more help from the staff for additional work that we can progress with. Thank you.
Lorne?
Other than the obvious of getting bigger horns for Ferdinand, going for the more mundane, I actually would like to try and see us have more custodial help for longer hours here at the library. It's pretty limited, almost non-existent actually during the day. And I think that would help in a number of areas around the library to get more support like that.
And Steve?
I think what might be a little different about the Board of Assessors as compared to some of the other boards is that the state, the DOR, regulates pretty much how things are to run. So again, what I've enjoyed about the Board of Assessors is we have a list of items that need to be worked on. We work on them, we go home. We come back to the next meeting, it's a new list, we work on them, we accomplish what we need to accomplish, we go home. So it's very rewarding in that way, but there isn't too much out of the box, if you will, that we can accomplish as individual board members. I mean, there are things, if the citizens are interested in accomplishing, we'll try, but it's pretty much doing the job at hand.
Thank you. And Chris, even though you've been serving for a period of time, you're running for the first time. So what other experiences have you had on a board or committee, and how might that prepare you for this effort?
Similar to what I mentioned before, serving on search committees at the college and at the church is a similar process. I am also on the, I got to get the title right or my boss will kill me, the OIT, I don't remember.
You're good.
I guess I used to work at Mass Bay Community College. Anyway, we're basically the governing body of IT, let's call it. And it's an important process because there's a very few people that have to make decisions that affect a very large amount of people. And there's some sense of pressure to that, but some sense of responsibility. But there's also a sense of reward by getting to listen to the people and build those decisions based on input and feedback.
I'm not going to ask about rebuttals. So those are the formal questions I have for this group. Audience questions. Do we have any audience questions? Or does the committee want to throw out some other questions that maybe weren't on my list of 4? But then we go to closing statements. I can take the list out and find some more questions if you want. Actually, no, I didn't bring that list with me. I only brought what I needed. Anyone have questions? Come on down.
So first of all, certainly thank you for spending some of your life's time on committees and boards. You know, I think it's appreciated, and so I thank you from the community's standpoint. My question is community engagement, and I think it's something that all boards and committees need to be a part of. How do we increase community engagement as a process, as a ongoing, important part of running our community? So it's a question. It makes no difference what board you're on. So if you can answer that, that'd be great.
Okay, well, I'm not going to let you leave because as you asked the question, you can decide the order of who goes first.
Are you doing the opposite of the
No, I do.
random of the closing statements? What are you doing on the closing?
Opposite of opening.
Opposite of. All right, so Lorna, you start.
Yeah, I think that's a great issue, actually, and it's one we have tried to deal with in the library quite a bit. I think one of them is just the number of hours we're open. Being able to be open more means we get more traffic through. The other one is increasing some of the programs that we have available for people to draw in more, not only more people, but a wider, more diverse audience. And it's tough. We've had programs that run and you get 24, 25 people show up. You do the same program at another time and you wind up getting 3. We also need to get a little bit more active, I think, in almost marketing in terms of the library and what the library can do for people.
Good. Steve?
Thank you, Steve. I just have to ask what you're reading.
I'm reading a mystery, so I'm
Okay.
a mystery buff.
Thank you. I don't have the answer, Steve. I don't think any of us have the answer. It's unfortunate there are so many of us here that are running unopposed. It seems when we have a school issue or something, controversial, we'll have a very busy town meeting, I think, as Adam alluded to, because those are hot buttons for folks. But I don't have the answer. I think we're all searching for it, and if somebody out there knows the answer, I hope they let the selectmen know. But it's disappointing to not see as many people who could be involved giving back a little and giving up some of their time and their expertise. Hopefully they'd be appreciated and step up.
Great, thank you, Steve. So I'm going to go Chris, Carol, and KG, and I'm going to sit
Then
down.
you're going to sit down, yeah.
The way we do it at work is we offer free food. That usually gets people to show up. As far as the engagement piece, I don't think there's a clear, good answer, but it seems to me that probably the most practical way of doing it is one person at a time. The same way that someone saw enough in me to listen to me through the fog and get me to listen back to them, I have a responsibility now to do that. And I think we all have that same responsibility to be stewards of civic engagement and maybe just get one person to be interested, and then they can get one other person to be interested and take it from there.
Thanks, Chris. I believe, Carol, you were next.
Okay. I'm going to step away from the library for a minute. And Steve, your question sort of makes me think of the voter turnout. And we're not the only town that has this kind of problem, but for our local elections, the turnout is certainly so low that if we could ever solve that kind of a problem, perhaps we would get more people to volunteer for the various things that are asked in a community. But that troubles me to see the turnouts for the elections. It troubles me to see the turnouts for town meeting, and it troubles me to see when there's an issue that many people are hot on, the crowds are unbelievable, and as soon as the vote comes in, everybody walks out. So those are things to me that are the background to the kind of question that you asked.
And I'm going to just, before I let KG answer.
Yes, I guess.
No, I said before I let you answer.
Sure.
To Carol's point, because you're my favorite cheerleader now. Most people who are watching are people who probably go to town meeting and who vote. But it frustrates me to no end when we have a local election and we get 10% turnout. So of 16,500 voters, 1,650 make the decision, or half of 1,650. And to have a town meeting, I mean, I've been guessing we'll get between 300 and 600 people at the first session of town meeting next week, which people think is awesome. Out of 16,500 people, we'll get 300 to 600 people. There are communities that have 5,000 people that turn out 2,000. So it's something that's very frustrating. And I think we're going to put Carol out in front of everybody to solve
No,
this
we're not.
problem. Sorry, KG.
Yes, I'm sure you're all aware of the social groups around here on Facebook and other community groups. Those are the ones to reach out to. Plus, we also have two great events in Ashland. One is the Farmers Market. The other one is the Ashland Day, where any of the committees which needs help, they should make themselves aware of all these factors, and them being there will help. A presence in the crowd will promote more people to come in and see you, who you are. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Come on up.
I'm going to be one of your tellers, too.
Excellent, thank you.
I understand that trustees for the library provide leadership. Are any of you, either Board of Health or assessor, certified by the state? Is there a certification the state authorizes you to be an assessor or a member of the Board of Health, so that you have some health background? Are you certified by the state?
There is a course that the state offers to the assessors.
Okay.
Okay, but did you pass that course?
I haven't taken the course yet.
Is there a mandatory time in which to take that
I'm
course?
told not right now.
Sounds like politics. And Board of Health, are you certified?
No, it's not required.
Well, I'm just asking because if you're providing health leadership for the town, what health background do you have that
health is not just limited to just basic health. It's also risk because of environmental issues where scientists can come up and then help. And data analyzing as well as putting them together is not required for being in health. You can look at the data and then find out what the...
So the state doesn't care that you have to have an official capacity? It's just a vote by the people in the town?
Right. That's why sometimes they hire consultants who can help you make that decision and then bring their information to you, and then you can make a decision on it based on the pros and cons of what you have.
Okay.
Right. That all depends on how much budget you have anyway, so that's what's important. So,
All right, thank you.
And we read a lot.
Anyone else? We have questions. Hopefully we have an order, too.
So timekeepers have a question. We want to know what's the greatest challenge facing your board? And I guess we'll go from KG backwards.
money, 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 funding. That's the greatest challenge that we have.
I can't think of any great challenges, Kathy. We pretty much deal with the business that we're presented with. Is some interesting issues that come up. There was something recently about solar panels at the MBTA station. That's a bit of a hot issue, but we deal with it. We work with legal. We work with the folks that work full time at the assessors. But there's no overwhelming issue at this point. Chris?
I think that as a citizen, and having spoken to a lot of citizens over the past few months since I've expressed interest in this position, it's perception. And I think when people think about the Ashland Board of Health, we got to get them to think that we are the Board of Health and that our primary and sole focus is public health.
Thank you. Lordy?
Thank you. I'd piggyback on KG's statement a little bit. Money is a big issue, particularly because
And
libraries...
I assume you don't mean having too much.
We've got too little? Oh, yeah. We are changing as all libraries are changing. And the more you go, for lack of a better word, I'll say electronic, the more expensive it gets. It's really strange to think of this, but I don't think anybody knows this, but a book that you can get by downloading is much, much more expensive than the old paper version. And yet that's the way people want to go. I mean, there's more and more concern with the technology side or end of things, and that's more expensive.
Carol?
I'm going to probably say money, too. We've gotten great support in the last couple of years for building the library hours back up. But the fees go up, too, and one of the really tough fees is the membership fee to belong to the Minuteman Network. And so when you see the bills for that, you just hope that the town money and the state money flows the way you want it to. So it'll always be money, especially when the town has the expense of pensions and all those kinds of things that eat into the budgets. I've seen the budget change over the years. I've seen it from the days when Steve was on finance and presented us, spreadsheets, to the way they're doing it now. And we are always being presented with budget issues from our library director. So we're on top of the needs of the library, but it'll probably always be money. I mean, people are good here. Staff, the patrons, people are wonderful, so that's not a problem. It's the money.
Thank you. Do we have any additional questions? Come on up.
Thank you, Adam. I'd like to address my question to Mr. Bullerwell and Ms. Ambacher. Just a point of information. If and when we are able to secure more hours for Mondays, will we be at the maximum funding level from the state?
Yes, it was an easy one. Yes, we'll go to 55 hours when we get Monday mornings in, and that puts us at the needed amount in order to get the full refund, aid, however you say that, back. So the answer is yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
It is wonderful.
Anyone else?
Sorry, Carol.
Another timekeeper question. Who's going to keep the time? She's taking the things with her.
What opportunities do you think exist on your board in the coming year? So what things are going to be happening over the next year that you think you'll be able to take advantage of, or you'd like to take advantage of?
And who goes first?
Steve.
Me? Steve?
Steve.
KG, if you'd like to.
I don't mind.
No, Steve, you were picked, so you have to go first.
I was picked. Okay. I thought you said.
We don't have any.
KG.
Okay. KG.
Well, I guess I'm working on the food application forms, which I'll progress. I'm sure Chris would help us out with putting that as a digital form, which we've already planned on. So that would help and free up more time from the staff so we can get more other work done in a timely manner, so we can comply with more of the regulations in time rather than a little late. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lorne?
I think the biggest that I can think of offhand is probably trying to increase staff. If we have more staff, we can do more programming.
Do you think there's an opportunity for that to happen?
There's always hope. And again, it goes back to that same question from before. It's a money issue as much as anything else. But if you don't ask, you don't get.
Chris?
My answer's a little bit different because,
Well, you say
Yeah.
Chris.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right, that's all right.
I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right. I was
Go ahead.
enjoying listening. I think probably the greatest opportunity is also the greatest challenge, and that's going back to civic engagement and civil debate. There are a lot of issues out on the table. Probably the hottest topic in public health today is adult use cannabis and medicinal use cannabis. And there are a lot of very divisive opinions and thoughts about it. And I think one of the challenges we're going to have on the Board of Health, as will the other boards involved in making the decisions that need to be made, is getting the people that are on one side to talk and listen to the people on the other side and vice versa. Because there's a lot of really important pieces of the puzzle that everybody has to kind of keep in line.
Carol?
What I was going to say is an opportunity could present itself where one of our trustees decides not to run. And you know, I've been doing this is the fourth time, and I've always been unopposed. It's good to have other people take an interest and step up to the plate. So there will be 2 more people running next year, both of whom have been on the board for a long time, as I have. So there may be opportunities for people to run for the library board, and I hope that will happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Additional questions, anyone? You don't have your list. So you good? All right. So it's now time for closing statements. We'll go in reverse order from opening statements, with each candidate having 1 minute. And we'll start with you, KG.
Yes, I'd like to serve the community with my volunteer time, and please do vote for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
I guess I'd like to say in closing, if you're looking for something to do, come to a meeting, whether it's the Board of Assessors or the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Health or library trustees or whatever it is, just go check it out. It's sometimes interesting, sometimes boring, sometimes crazy, but I think you'll learn something, and whether you vote for me or whether you vote for anybody else here up at the table, just get out and vote.
Thank you. Chris?
Could I borrow some of KG's time? There are 3 points I want to make. 1, please consider the people whose names are on a ballot very seriously, because all of those people took the initiative to sign a letter of intent to go out and reach out to the people and ask for signatures and to come here and talk to you tonight. Definitely, I'll reiterate all the comments about getting out to vote. I know that sometimes it's inconvenient, and sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes it might seem trivial. But if waiting in line to vote is a little bit too difficult for you, at some point you might end up waiting in line for fresh water and things like that. So think about the privileges you have. And finally, I want to just say thank you to everybody responsible for this event tonight, and thank you all in the audience for coming out, and for everybody watching at home.
Thank you, Chris. Lorne?
Very similar, I guess, in some ways. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. I'd like to thank everybody in the town for supporting the things we've tried to do here at the library. One of my big ones, which Steve will remember, was trying to get that light out in front of the crosswalk kind of thing. But it's amazing how many people it took. Somebody had to go and annoy and harass them, and that's what I'm good at, and in order to get things done like that. But just increasing the hours, all the other kinds of wonderful things that go on here at the library depends upon a lot of volunteers, and I thank everybody. Thank you.
And Carol?
We've thanked the Friends for tonight. I just want to be sure you know the Friends in so many ways support this library, and it would be great to see more people support the Friends, not just the farmers market. That one is so obvious with the crowds that go. But if you've never been to one of the book sales, there are 4 of them a year. They are fantastic. The numbers of people turn out, and the ways that people meet up with old friends and so forth, and the purchase cupcakes and purchase books at ridiculously low prices is a great way to support the Friends. And so that's just one way. So come to the events that you see advertised in directions in both of the newspapers and support the Friends that way, because the Friends are supporting the library. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you to all of you in this group for your participation. We're going to take a short break to reset for the next group and be back in a few minutes. Okay, just for those of you who might be tuning in and not seeing the first half, tonight is the 2018 Ashland Candidates Forum, sponsored by We Love Ashland and the Friends of the Ashland Public Library. We thank them for sponsoring this evening. And a reminder of the format before we start the second half. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to provide an opening statement. That will be followed by a series of questions. Candidates will each have 60 seconds to respond to a question. Where appropriate, I have the ability to grant candidates a 30-second rebuttal. And I don't need to read the rest of that. I have been asked to remind folks that this Thursday at 7 o'clock at the Ashland Community Center, the Board of Selectmen are holding a forum on the 3 ballot questions. For those of you who've been living under a rock, they are on the purchase of the Valentine estate, the Mendez School feasibility study, and there's some third one has on the ban of retail establishment of adult use cannabis. Have to have humor in some of this. So let me introduce the candidates, and I can remember the order you see. Eric Gemperlein running for the Planning Board. Rob Scher running for re-election to the Board of Selectmen. John J. Higgins running as a first-time candidate for the Board of Selectmen. Yolanda Greaves running for re-election to the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board. Kathy Bates running for re-election to the School Committee. And Mark Terry running for re-election to the School Committee. Opening statements, each candidate has 2 minutes, and first up is Kathy. Unless there's another Kathy.
No, there we go. Okay. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library in the group We Love Ashland for hosting this event. This is a great way for the public to become aware and informed of who is running for the different seats in town. So I also thank WACA-TV for their coverage of this event, especially for those people who are unable to attend in person. So I'm Kathy Bates. I'm running for one of 2 seats on the school committee. This will be my 3rd term if I'm elected. The school committee is responsible for overseeing the school district with 3 main responsibilities: overseeing the superintendent, approving the budget, and settling school policies. I'm running again because I believe having the consistency of members on a board is invaluable. There's always a learning curve to any new position. So with 6 years under my belt, I look forward to continuing our work. I have really enjoyed working with this board. The 5 of us work well together, and we work well with our superintendent, Jim Adams. We each have different strengths, but that we bring to the table, strengths that balance each other. Because we work well together, we can focus on the overarching goals of our school district and help to facilitate their fruition. So Mark and I are running unopposed for 2 positions, but I'm grateful for people's past support, and I hope that people still feel I'm a valuable member. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Next up, Eric.
Hello, I'm Eric Emperline, and I'm running for planning board. I've lived in Ashland for 26 years, and this is my 4th time running in as many years for local office. I've been lucky enough to have been elected for the Housing Authority twice, and I am now the chair of the Housing Authority. I graduated from Framingham State with a degree in urban studies, and I'm currently finishing up my master's at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where I'm getting my master's in regional planning with a focus on watershed planning and aging in place. I would really love to make Ashland a more walkable place for its residents. I think we're lacking certain amenities and retail destinations downtown, and I think that's a real shame. I would love for Ashland to focus more on that retail and commercial development and move away from residential development. And as the member of the planning board, I would try to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Yolanda.
Good evening. Thank you, Adam. Thank you to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library and the group We Love Ashland for having this forum. Thank you for WACA for filming and being able to share this with the community. As was said at the introduction, my name is Yolanda Greaves, and I am seeking re-election for a 3rd term to the Ashland Board of Selectmen. As I think back on my 2nd term, the last 3 years, we've gone and we've had to hire another town manager. Fortunately, this was a smooth process as we were able to bring on Michael Herbert, who had been our assistant town manager. And it's been really nice working with Michael. The transition has been very smooth, and I feel that he has really done a great job working with the board in the last year and a half that he's been our town manager. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, I have focused on infrastructure, regional collaboration, and communication with the residents. I have brought various programs into Ashland that have allowed us to receive grant funding to move various town projects forward. One such program is the Community Compact Program. This is a program that was presented by the Baker-Polito administration about 3 years ago. The day after my last election, I found out about the Community Compact Program. I presented it to the rest of our board and to town management. With the approval of the board, I worked with the town management to complete the application, and Ashland became the 10th community to sign on to the Community Compact Program. Based on that initiative, we have received over $60,000 in grant funding to help us with our capital plan project that was done last year and our Complete Streets Prioritization Plan that we completed this year. If reelected, I will continue to work to find programs that bring grant money, your tax dollars, back to Ashland. I look forward to answering the moderators and public's questions tonight and to assure the voters that they would benefit from allowing me to continue to represent them as their selectman for another term.
Thank you, Yolanda. Jay?
Hello, my name is Jay Higgins. This is my first time running for office, so I don't have a track record yet that I can talk to you about today, but I will tell you a little bit about my background. I'm not an Ashland native. I've lived here for a little under 2 years now. I am a Metro West native, however. I grew up in Framingham and Milford. I graduated from Marion High, which unfortunately, as I'm sure most of you are aware, I just found out is closing, which is very sad. After high school, I left this area. I joined the Air Force. I was stationed in Texas and then in Montana, where I did nuclear security. Coming back, I decided to come back to the Metro West area and go to Framingham State, where I graduated with a bachelor's in political science. I've worked since for multiple members of Congress and other various state reps. And currently, I am earning my master's degree from the Harvard Extension School in government. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
You look surprised. There were only 2 of you left.
I guess that's it. My name is Robert Scher. I'm a candidate for re-election to the Select Board. When I ran in 2015, I talked about basically 3 things. The first was having a coherent vision for our community, working on the best of the past, and while making a sustainable future, focusing on our quality of life. The second thing I talked about was having a strong and stable financial management for the town. And the third, at the time, if you recall, the Warren Conference Center was up for sale by Northeastern University. So fast forward 3 years, and we've moved ahead on all those things. Of course, with the help of Senator Spilka, we've kept the Warren Conference Center intact. We've moved ahead on acquiring a number of key parcels to help our vision of the town. The Girl Scout property added key parcels to the town forest. We're funding the Riverwalk, Quiet Zone, cleaning up Cadillac paint. The list goes on. And we've, through creative and prudent financial management, and I thank the management team for that, Michael Herbert and the folks he's brought on to do that, we're able to fund a number of key things. We've increased the number of firefighters. There's a lot. We've increased the hours here at the library, for example. So, I'd like to continue that kind of progress. I have a number of ideas for other initiatives, and so I'd appreciate your support for re-election. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. And last but not least, Mark.
Let me guess, my turn.
Yes.
I want to join others in thanking everybody who's put this program together, and to those who are here to watch and participate, as well as those at home. I also want to thank my wife and family for agreeing to put up with potentially 3 more years of being on the school committee and multiple late nights. When I started to think about running for school committee 3 years ago, I really felt compelled to do that. It was just one of those things that for any of you who've experienced it, you feel like you have to do something. And sort of went through the exercise of trying to figure out for myself why that was. And certainly found having 2 kids in the system, there's a natural draw to try to provide the best education you can for your kids and to want to be a part of that. But there's also an element that I've discovered when participating in the Leadership Metro West Leadership Academy in 2003-04, and just came to realize how important being involved in my community was to me. And the last part was sort of thinking about what I do professionally, and I'm a lawyer. I represent school committees and municipalities, and so I brought a lot of things I thought to the table in terms of different experiences that really said, you have to do this. And as I thought about whether or not this was the time to run again, other than your term being up, I felt the same way now as I did 3 years ago, and so here we are. Sort of in line with the way Rob approached things, I look back at what I said here 3 years ago. Feels like 5 sometimes. And there were a number of things that I kind of highlighted that I really wanted to see done, and I was really pleased to go back and look at that list and see what kind of progress the school district has made in the last 3 years. One of those was to have a strategic plan, and we do, and we follow it, and it's an active part of our discussion really at every one of our meetings. The second was to see the town implement free full-day kindergarten, which with the 15 seconds, with the support of the Board of Selectmen and the school committee, we voted and we'll see happen and implemented this fall. I wanted to see the reinstatement of electives.
Sorry.
Never tell
The
a
crickets.
lawyer,
You weren't here to hear the crickets earlier.
Really? All right. I'll work in the rest later. But I'm pleased to be here with you. I look forward to answering questions. Thank you.
Sorry. Question number 1. What are the top 3 issues the board for which you are running will face over the coming year? Each of you has 1 minute to respond, and we will start with Yolanda.
Say the question again, though.
Happy to. What are the top 3 issues the board for which you are running will face over the coming year?
Wow.
Yeah, sorry, you're first, but
That's okay.
somebody had to be.
As boards, we all have a lot of similar ones, but I think one of the biggest ones facing our board and the community right now is the question about adult use cannabis and just cannabis in our community. We have things coming up on both the town meeting warrant and the ballot, and as a community, we have to decide what we want to do with that. So I think that's one of the biggest ones. Whatever way it goes at the ballot, there will be more work that needs to be done once a decision is made. Another issue is always our finance and our budget, making sure that we're using our resources wisely. And let's see, a third is working on our strategic plan as a community, looking at our downtown and looking at what type of community we want to be, not only now, but in 20 years and in 30 years.
Thank you very much. Rob.
Well, I'd say cannabis and our resolution of the medical dispensary and the opt-out will be a big issue. I also think, we've heard a lot about stormwater, or at least the board has, and maybe other folks haven't yet, but that's a potential expensive one. And I think the third one that at least I'd like to focus on is sustainability and the next step on that. You never know. One thing about being on the Board of Selectmen, all sorts of things come up. You never know what's next. But I think in terms of forward-thinking stuff, let's talk about what we can do to address climate change in our town. And I'd like to make that a focus for my own initiative.
Thank you, Rob. Kathy? You're not first.
Well, I think for the schools, I was thinking, can Mark and I answer this one together?
No. You answer, then he can disagree with you. That's how this works.
Well, I suppose, the biggest thing right now is it's on the town meeting is going to be the feasibility study. That we need, that we need the fund, that, we're looking for the voters to help fund that feasibility study for either renovating Mendez or that might show that we need just a new school. So that's one of the big things. The social emotional learning in our schools, helping our students, making sure that our budget, we can fund the programs for that, supporting our students. And that, that all ties into school safety too. And on a smaller note, we need to hire a new AD, athletic director.
Thank you. Eric?
For the planning board, I think one of the largest issues facing it is getting the levels of affordable housing in Ashland to the 10% level, so we are no longer at risk of Chapter 40Bs, developments coming into town. I would also like to see more walkable features in Ashland. I think the Upper Charles Rail Trail is a great plan, and I would love to see more things of that nature in town. And lastly, just strengthening Ashland's downtown core, bringing businesses in, and just providing more options for residents.
Thank you. Pardon me, I'm writing these down because I'm going to need them later. Jay?
Well, I think that the most important issue in front of the Board of Selectmen right now is obviously recreational marijuana, which I think that we should support and allow in the town. Banning it could have unforeseen consequences outside of just banning recreational. Medicinal might leave as well if they can't profit off of the recreational in addition to it to help support the medicinal dispensary. On top of that, I think that trying to increase the amount of charging ports that we have in the town for electric vehicles. Multiple manufacturers have announced that over the next decade or two, they will be 100% electric, and Ashland will fall behind if we don't keep up. And third, being one of the few people in the room under 30, I would love to find ways to incentivize young people to move into Ashland, whether that be in some sort of property tax incentive, what have you.
Okay, thank you. And hang on a second, Mark, while I write that down. Mark.
Thank you. So I do agree with Kathy on, I think, two of the points that she made. I think the social emotional learning issue is a huge one. It's one we're trying to figure out how to approach it. But it is really sort of an understanding of how the emotional health of students connects to their academic achievement and how to support that. So that's certainly a huge aspect of what we're working on. The other, I also agree, is the Mendez building is in much need of likely replacement. I don't know that they think they can repair it, but obviously one way or another we've got to address the issue because we've got more students than we have space for in that building. And I think the third thing is still trying to rebuild after 20 years of cuts, adding some elective programming back into the high school. I'm not saying we don't have any now, but we are not yet at the point we were at 20 years ago, and I'd really like to see us make more progress in that area.
Thank you, Mark. Rebuttals from anyone? Okay. Next question. This is why I was writing down your answers. Based on your responses to the last question, asking about the top 3 issues, what skills, talents, and expertise do you bring that will uniquely address these issues? And we're not looking for how you're going to solve the issues, but what your skills, talents, and experiences will allow you to help work towards these issues, address them. And Coincidentally, Mark, you get to start. If anyone needs their three, I've got them here.
So I think the way I approach, I try to approach all the problems that we're confronted with as a school committee is probably listening more than talking, trying to understand from people who know more than I do. We happen to have a phenomenal superintendent of schools here who really knows this community, knows his staff, knows his district. That's what he's for. Our job is to sort of test whether we're comfortable with the direction he wants to go in. And fortunately, as Kathy said earlier, we have a great working relationship there. So I think listening is probably the first skill. From that point, I would say it's really about problem solving and looking really at what is in the best interest of our kids. That is one thing that I think all 5 school committee members, Jim Adams, every administrator I've talked about anything has come back to is what's in the best interest of our kids. We have not once had a conversation where somebody's individual agenda comes above that. And so I think I'd like to see us continue in that fashion and feel real good about the committee we have in place now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Jay?
Can you just repeat the question for me?
Sure. Based on your response to the last question asking you about the top 3 issues that you think your board's going to face, what skills, talents, and experiences do you bring that will uniquely address these issues?
Well, I think that the first thing that I have is that I'm a member of the younger generation. There's a theory that I've learned in my political science studies, which is that basically a demographic that's underrepresented in politics will not have the issues that are important to them raised. And so I think it's very important that we have a young person on the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you. Eric?
So I would like to echo Jay's statement about having young people in local government. I think that's a great idea, and I think that we can represent these people who might not necessarily take the time to voice their opinion. In terms of getting housing levels up, that's a pretty daunting task. I know the Board of Selectmen and the town manager almost had a great opportunity on 128 Main to get us more affordable housing units through smart planning. I would love to have more opportunities like that. In terms of regional trails, I've worked with the Department of Conservation and Recreation on their recreational trails program, and I have experience in the grant writing process. So I would like to take that opportunity and help the town.
Thank you. Eric? Rob?
Thank you. So in terms of the cannabis question, I think my strengths are in, transparency and communication with the public and setting up mechanisms where people can communicate and talk about these issues. I think, and I do have to, we are having the public facility, Adam, I'm adding that one back in, but that is a major challenge we'll be facing over the next year, building a public safety building. And I think, there's a similar set of skills in terms of teamwork and things like that. So the third one about the climate change and the net zero, I think I want to try to build a coalition to bring that in, to look at our own energy production and sustainability and how to move forward with that to address greenhouse gases and climate change. So I see it as a new kind of coalition building thing I'd like to put my skills on. So thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Kathy?
I think the skills and the talents that I bring to this school committee are I'm a good listener, and I like to hear many viewpoints and look into resources and listen. That's why I like being on a committee of 5, because it's 5 opinions and we have good discussions, and then we come to a consensus together. So I think I'm a good listener. I add balance and ballast to our group.
Thank you. And Yolanda?
So when I address the 3 issues, my background is in finance. I work for a small software company, and I do all the finance work, so I understand what our finance needs are and how we work it. And fortunately, as selectmen, we set policy and procedure, but it's good for us to understand what's going on with our finances. I also think that I represent another demographic on the board, that it represents about 50% of our community as a female. And one thing I've heard from many people is that they like that different voice as part of the Board of Selectmen, and I think it's just as important as a younger demographic.
Thank you, Yolanda.
Can I do a rebuttal on that one? And his too?
Okay, Rob is down as not believing that females are important, okay? You want to get that down for the paper?
The middle-aged white male, that's so different.
Are there any rebuttals?
I did want to address, not so much a rebuttal, but I want to talk a little bit about Eric's points, which I thought, one thing we have put in place a housing production plan, which, we have goals for affordable housing. That also allows us to take action on 40B projects. So we don't necessarily have to go with whatever the developer wants. I've been a member of the Upper Charles Trail Committee for years, and we're hoping to move forward with that. I share your interest in walkability and pedestrians. We also have a complete streets policy, which we put in place and are working on prioritizing. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Sold. Next question. The role of a committee member is to represent the Ashland community in decisions. In what ways will your community outreach help you to bring the community's perspectives to committee discussions? I'm going to repeat that because I muffed it. The role of a committee member is to represent the Ashland community in decisions. In what ways will your community outreach help you to bring the community's perspectives to committee discussions? And we're going to start with Eric.
So my job at Ashland State Park, I'm in the public every day during the summer. If you guys want to come and talk to me, feel free. I am at 26, I'm just really starting to get into town politics, but over the last 4 years, I think I've shown my willingness to listen and get in touch with the people of Ashland, and I would continue that. Yeah.
Thank you. Mark.
So I think from my perspective, one of the things that's always valuable when communicating with people out in the public is to recognize that sometimes we all live in our own little bubbles, and we tend to spend time with people that are like us in some way. I tend to spend time with families with kids that are about the same age as my kids, and that becomes sort of your view of Ashland. Every single time I've communicated with other people in this community in some other forum, I get a different perspective. And I think it's critical for us to continue to interact with people because we have a responsibility on behalf of the students in this town to try to provide them the best education, but we also have to understand sometimes if we're looking for resources that are limited in scope, that we have to be sensitive to what other people in the community are willing to support or can support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Jay?
Well, this has been said a few times, but I believe that I'm a really good listener to constituents, both in previous jobs and current job. I'm very attentive to what people have to say. In fact, every job I've had before politics in the military, I was a law enforcement and did security, which required me to deal with the public and to hear what they truly had to say. And so I would say that listening to the constituents before my own opinion would be how I would best serve.
Thank you. Yolanda.
I think as many people have said, as a public servant, our job is to listen to the people. And I feel that in my past 6 years as a selectman, my 5 years as a school committee member, I did that. I try to attend events. I try to interact with the community at different places. And I always am open and willing and tell people if you have a question, if you have an issue, please feel free to reach out. One of the things that I did when I was chair in my second year as on the Board of Selectmen was we have this wonderful event called the Farmers Market. And in working with members of the Farmers Market Volunteer Board, I said, wouldn't it be great if members of the Selectmen would be there? And our first summer, members of the Board of Selectmen were at the Farmers Market in a tent almost every Saturday. We've now sort of created more that all the committees now are invited to be part of that. But even if we're not expected to be there, I try to go to the farmer's market, I try to go to events and try to listen as much as possible.
Thank you, Yolanda. Kathy?
Yeah, just echoing what Yolanda said, obviously it's important that we're out in the community and we're listening. I try to go to those events too, farmers market, and just wherever I am, I try to be open if people have feedback and try to listen. We do have a Facebook page and a Twitter page, and we try to put up information and we try to gather information.
Okay, thank you. And Rob?
So I just want to echo that it is important as elected public officials that I try to attend as many local events as I can, talking to people about their concerns. Of course, if I feel it's necessary, I'll post factual information to Facebook. I think one thing I would encourage people, email the Board of Selectmen. We read all of them and reply to a lot of them as well. So I would encourage people to do that. The other thing I wanted to mention, we are working, on transparency. So post our information. You can look at the town website. Often, if we're having a packet of information we're looking at, we'd like to start posting that. It becomes public afterwards, but I'd like people to look at the same things we're looking at. So we're making efforts to be transparent, posting the budget books, a lot of documents on the town website. So I'd like to continue that kind of transparency and public information.
Thank you, Rob. Before I ask for rebuttals, I had a question, Rob. When Chris was up here earlier, he mentioned that in his short time with the Board of Health, he's gotten close to, 2,000 emails? Give me a sense for you, Yolanda. What kind of volume do you guys get for emails to the Board of Selectmen?
Well, we get a lot of, I wouldn't call it spam, but there's a lot of outside parties. And some of them are like Division of Local Services. So we do get a lot of information, the Mass Municipal Association.
But just from residents?
For residents, it's not that, I would say it's 6 a week. It's not an enormous number.
I would say not enough, considering some of the issues that we're dealing with, and knowing that people have a hard time coming to our meetings and giving us their feedback at the meeting. I would encourage more. Talk to us via email if that's your way of doing it.
So I don't want to go off onto
Okay.
but I did want to just point out that we had one member of the Board of Health say that in a very short period he's received emails that number in the thousands, and here we have members of the Board of Selectmen, and I'm happy to ask the school committee the same question, that they received 6 or 7 a week. So I would point that out to folks who are here and who will watch this later. Everyone who's come up here has asked for feedback by email. That sounds like an invitation that should be taken up. I was going to rebuttals or additional comments.
Just an additional comment. Just with my experience in the past of having worked for members of Congress and for state representatives, we really don't get enough feedback from constituents at all levels. And so I can imagine that at the lower levels it's even less. But if I was to make my way onto the board, I look forward to answering all the questions that constituents would have.
Okay, next. This could be my favorite question of the evening, and I can't take credit for it. Yeah, none of you are prepared for this one. If you could recruit one superhero to chair the board you seek to join, which one would it be, and more importantly, why?
Wait, say it again? Would we be
If
a
you
superhero?
if you could recruit one superhero, and there's no written definition of what a superhero is, to chair the board you seek to join, which one would it be and why?
To chair the board.
Rob.
Oh, thanks.
I know, right?
You're welcome.
Well, superhero. Okay, I'll go with Spider-Man because he kind of brings a fresh, kind of wild perspective to him. He's ready to move in many directions, but he always ends up in the right place. How's that?
Okay.
I think Rob Aquaman is kind of more
No,
environmentally
I
friendly.
meant to say Aquaman.
Kathy.
We already have 5 superheroes, plus our superintendent, who's the best superhero. But if we needed another one,
The moderator would love to rule that out of order.
let's see.
That's
Who
your
would
answer.
it be? That's my answer.
That's your
Okay.
answer. That's your answer. Mark.
Yeah, so Kathy kind of stole my line. I thought I was going to go with Lori Tosti, our chair.
Stick with Aquaman.
Which I'd characterize as Wonder Woman. There you go.
Wonder Woman?
Sure.
Why?
A why?
There was a why to it, yeah.
Well, so I'll go back to my real answer, which was Lori Tosti, who is our chair. Because I think she does a great job facilitating dialogue and making sure all voices are heard.
Okay. Eric.
I think the Flash would be a fitting superhero. I know in government things can go pretty slow, so if we can speed things up, I think that'd be a great superhero to have on our side.
Do you have any contact with the Flash? Because I could use him next
I do.
week. Okay.
I do.
Could you have him show up next Wednesday, 7 o'clock at the high school?
Yeah, I think he can help facilitate things.
That'd be awesome. I'd really appreciate that. Yolanda.
So I'm going to preface my answer with the fact that that question in and of itself means that you have to be someone who knows all the superheroes or knows many superheroes if you're looking for an actual character.
Well, actually, I only need to know one, a good one.
A good one. Well, I would say that I would go with Wonder Woman. I think she is very strong, but also tries to bring peace and discussion and listens to whatever she's involved with.
Okay, thank you. And Jay?
I would go with Iron Man. Given his financial resources, I think that he would be very popular within the town. Additionally, given the fact that he was willing to change his position on the military-industrial complex, he's shown that he's willing to think through issues. So there you go.
Thank you. Rebuttals? I didn't expect any.
I still think Rob should go with Aquaman.
We've reached the part of the evening where the questions now are different. Not everyone's going to get the same question. The question you get will depend upon the board or committee that you are seeking to join. So this question is only for candidates for the Board of Selectmen. Town meeting and board committee meetings are attended by a small group of dedicated and engaged individuals. How do we expand the conversation to include people that may not necessarily be able to attend those meetings for whatever reason? How do you ensure that the voices you are hearing at meetings are representative of the town as a whole? Jay.
Well, again, to refer back to the millennial aspect, I think that we could do a better job of advertising these meetings online, not only advertising them, but potentially live streaming them, making them as available as we can on Facebook, on the Ashland website, everything we could to make it as easy as possible for everybody to be present, even if they're not physically able to be present. And that also doesn't just go for millennials, but there are potentially seniors or people of any age who couldn't physically make it to a meeting that would be able to participate better.
Thank you, Jay. Rob?
Yeah, I think we need to look at all the different venues that we have. And I found, the newspaper doesn't cover us as much as they used to, so we need to replace that to some extent. I think we should, I've been, as I said, I've been posting things to the Ashland Mass Bulletin Board. It's, just factual things. It got a lot of response. I thought that was very effective. So we've got to be constantly looking out to new vehicles and not just be, happy with the way things are. So, whether it's email or, and looking at alternative times that fit people with different schedules, we need to keep doing that to maintain increased public participation.
Thanks, Rob. And Yolanda?
Well, we are very fortunate to have WACA-TV. I mean, this they can't live stream, but most of our selectmen meetings and any meetings that happen at Town Hall are currently live streamed. Our town meetings are out on the via cable. They're also live streamed, so that's already happening. But we need to find other ways to meet with the people who can't show up at a meeting. And I know for myself, it's a discussion that we on the board have been having for the last 6 years since I've been a member, and we're trying different ways. The Farmers Market Initiative was one way, trying to go to different events. But we also need to maybe look at when we have town meeting, and I've already mentioned something to our town manager. We can't change anything for our spring town meeting because it's by charter, but let's play around with our fall special town meeting. Right now we have it during the week. Would it be beneficial to have it on a Saturday? Try that, see what the response is. And I think we just need to keep trying different ways to reach out to different people. Facebook is certainly one way, but not everyone is on Facebook and not everyone is comfortable having a conversation there. And certainly we as a board have to be careful as to what we can share and discuss on Facebook.
Thank you. I'll just open it up to rebuttals if anyone would have one. Jay?
Thank you. The meetings are live streamed, but they are not very well, the live stream is not very well advertised. I actively search out for when these meetings are occurring and where they're going to be live streamed, and I have a difficult time finding them. So I can imagine people who may have other things going on, jobs, families, kids, that don't have time to be actively searching out for this information might struggle to find them.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Planning board. To our one planning board candidate, I don't think you get rebuttal to this. Define what smart growth means to you.
Smart growth is sustainable growth. I know that's another buzzword on top of a buzzword, but it's doing things while taking everything into consideration, making sure the policies you implement don't negatively affect other things within that context. Smart growth isn't allowing a huge apartment complex in and just to deal with the bills that we pay for the upkeep on that. Smart growth is something that has to be planned, something that we really have to think of, and what we need to consider the needs of the people when we're thinking about smart growth. And I think smart growth is moving away from auto-oriented development and increasing the pedestrian and walkability of Ashland, and that's what smart growth means to me.
Thank you. For our school committee candidates, a growing body of studies presents compelling evidence connecting student learning in the arts to a wide array of academic and social benefits. Yet when budgets get tight, the first thing that seems to get cut is funding for arts-related electives and specials. Do you believe that arts education should be an integral part of educating Ashland students? And if so, how do you ensure it remains part of the curriculum despite funding challenges? Mark.
I've been fortunate that in the 3 years that I've been on the school committee, we've actually been in an expansion mode rather than a contraction mode. So I haven't had to face that decision or that circumstance where we have to cut something and that's even on the chopping block or up for discussion. So it's a hard question to answer. What I'd say is right now, I think you have a school committee, without speaking for others, that believes that the curriculum needs to be well-rounded. That includes the arts. I think there are significant efforts to expand our STEM program to include the A, which makes it STEAM. That's by design. We've had the opportunity to create a makerspace with a lot of support from AEFI. So I think the current school committee and administration is fully committed to the arts. Honestly, I can't even address the circumstance where I would think about cutting it, and I hope I never have to.
Kathy.
Yeah, I would agree with Mark. I've been on it one term earlier than Mark, so 6 years, and there was a time where we did have to cut things, but since then we always talk about it. Arts is very important to the current board and the administration, so we're always asking, okay, can we add back in, the things that were cut years ago, and the makerspace. So we definitely do support it. It's always in our talks.
Thank you.
Rebuttal, Mr. Moderator? Can I have a rebuttal?
Sure.
So my rebuttal is actually on Eric's question. He doesn't have an opponent here, but.
Did I not ask for a rebuttal?
You did not, but
I
that's fine.
apologize.
Actually,
Could we just ask you to hang on 1 minute and see if there's any rebuttal on that question before we go back to Eric, and I do apologize.
No, okay.
None.
No.
Okay, so I apologize.
My rebuttal is basically that I think the Board of Selectmen is one of the most important planning bodies in town, and I think a smart growth question should be addressed to us. That's one of the major reasons I wanted to run for the board. We've been very proactive in looking at the development in town here and what's going on. So we've made a number of land acquisitions and putting out proposals for people, all having to do with our vision of how we want the town developed. So,
let me do this.
Piggyback on what he's saying.
I'm going to call an audible, and I'm going to ask the Board of Selectmen candidates what smart growth means to them.
Sure.
And since, Rob, you volunteered, you get to be first.
Sure. Well, it has to do with, sustainability, but you look at things like mass transit, complete streets, bicycle, pedestrian, other methods of getting around besides automobiles, and where you're locating key resources such as housing or development. You look at current, what they call nodes, like in our case it would be downtown, Route 126. The rail transit district was whether you like it or not or agree that it was a smart growth initiative. So that's the way I'd look at it. Try to make it rational and sustainable for the future and kind of break out of some of the old patterns.
Okay, thank you. Jay?
I would agree a lot with Rob. I think that smart growth would be in green growth. I think that anything that we can do to make our town more green, including more charging ports, incentivizing businesses to put in their own charging ports, incentivizing houses, all of that, more solar panels, anything that we can do would be beneficial for our town, for our future, for children in schools, would be fantastic.
Okay, thank you. And Yolanda?
I would say this is probably one question we all agree on, that smart growth is looking at where you're doing your development, how it impacts your current town, how it's going to impact what you're doing for economic growth and housing growth in the future. We are fortunate that we have a housing production plan that's been put in place that helps with some of the development that's coming in. And I think that we just need to be diligent and continue to do that, to work on our sustainability and how we can make sure that as we move Ashland forward and add to our housing, we're doing it in a way that uses very good guidance and rules and looking at that green sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Ends up back at Planning Board again. Ashland has seen significant periods of residential growth over the last 20 years, and yet we're still not at our 10% threshold for affordable housing. How do we get there?
Well, I'm not sure of the particular answer, but I do know that the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen have been looking at innovative ways to boost up our 10% housing level, and I would like to continue to explore those options, whatever they may be, to get to that point.
Okay. And so I don't commit the same sin again. Anyone have a rebuttal for that?
Yes, I do. It's more like just the information. We do, as Yolanda and I both said, we do have a housing production plan in place where we're committed to producing X units a year. And I think people are aware that affordable housing is a need. And the question, of course, is how to balance people's, quality of life and desire for open space with, more housing and, especially affordable housing. But we have a housing production plan in place, and that gets us, as I said before, the opportunity to sign off on these 40Bs. We have more influence and actually can help control them as long as we stay in line with our plan. So we've been proactive in that.
Okay. Anyone else? Yolanda?
So, I agree with Rob in that, we do have the affordable housing production plan, but we also need to get creative in how we can find and create affordable housing. But I also think part of it is letting people know that affordable housing also means workforce housing. It means housing for our teachers and our firefighters and our police officers so they can stay in town, and we have to be creative on how we can find that and make sure that when new developments are coming in, and we've already done this, we have a new bylaw that you have to do a certain amount of housing that's affordable when you're doing a larger development.
Thank you. Anyone else? School committee. There's been relative stability and harmony between the school department and other municipal departments over the past few years. How did we get there, and how do we stay there?
How did we get there, or how?
How did we get there? Because we're there. And how do we stay there?
Who gets the first answer?
Oh, it says right here, Kathy. It honestly says right here, Kathy.
Oh, thank you. So how did we get there? Well, a lot of perseverance and listening, and our superintendent working with our town manager and being collaborative. And so, yeah, that's part of my closing statement, is that I have enjoyed working with the groups and developing those relationships. So I think just a lot of good listening and being willing to listen to the other side, and so we need to continue that. So.
Mark.
So this is another one of those things that coming at the right time kind of makes this answer maybe a little different. Because for the most part, for the 3 years I've been on the school committee, the relationships with the finance committee and the board of selectmen have been really good. I'd love to say that's because of me, but it's not. There were some real specific actions that were taken about 3 years ago, where we developed some financial policies that were accepted by all 3 boards that really identified how funds would be allocated. And I think what that did was it eliminated some of the contentiousness that came around budget season about whose priorities outweighed other departments, with the school department more important than what the police department wanted. So those issues have largely been taken out of the realm of discussion. There also, to Kathy's point, has been some real good communication between Jim Adams and Mike Herbert, who's here, about other things that are kind of one-time needs, and grateful for the Board of Selectmen and Mike's support in some of the things that we've accomplished over the last few years. I'll mention quickly the free full-day kindergarten. Thank you.
Any rebuttal or additional comments from Yolanda?
Well, I think this is definitely a two-way street. I mean, I can remember when school committee members would not even want to be in the same room as Board of Selectmen, and time that, part of that has been.
I remember those
Yes.
two.
Part of that has been time. It has been change of leadership on both sides. I think we are very fortunate that we have a great superintendent and a great town manager who are working together and are open to the dialogue, and two boards that I think have worked hard to make sure that it's not a school versus town issue, but we are the town of Ashland with a school board and a general government board of selectmen.
Thank you. Anyone else?
If I could just quickly pick up on Yolanda's point, I think one of the things that's happened in town generally in the last 3 years has been a lot of work to look at issues from a more strategic perspective, and sort of setting that framework around the dialogue that we're having really helps everybody understand sort of on the general government capacity, what are the things they're trying to accomplish, the school department, what are we trying to accomplish, and trying to reconcile those things together when it comes to long-term planning. And I think that's produced a better result for all of us.
Thank you. Board of Selectmen. About a week or two ago, the town published a very comprehensive budget document that's available to the public. According to the figures in one of those pages, it stated that Ashland is second from the bottom in per capita spending as compared to other Metro West communities. Would you support increasing spending if it meant that the town would be able to provide more services or amenities? Rob?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to continue the kind of creative and effective financial management we've had over the last 3 years. So that, I'm very proud of that lowest, I thought it was actually the lowest, not the second to the lowest, per capita cost for municipal services. I would like to continue that. I think every issue that you have to judge on its merits. But I think as an overall measure of our success, I think it's a very important measure. But it's something you look at after you make these decisions and kind of help you evaluate where you are. So I'm not going to answer that one way or the other. I think everything you look at, you have to make decisions. We've got stormwater coming up, and I'd like to look at creative ways of dealing with that. For example, we always have free cash every year. We have our funds, that our reserve funds we built up. Let's look at using those creatively as we enter kind of a new phase that we've achieved our reserve funds levels.
Okay, thank you. Yolanda?
I would agree with Rob. I think that's a positive. I think it means we're spending our taxpayers' dollars wisely. And I think we've gone to the community when we went to go for an override, and we heard from the community that they don't want more taxes, that they themselves have to live within a budget, and we as a town have to work within our budget. And I think we need to continue that. Are there more things that we can be doing? I think we've been very creative. We added 4 firefighters. Our police department is fully staffed or just about fully staffed. Our senior center, we have a human resource director, and they're doing so much more at our community center. So we're doing something right, but we're not using as much money as other people to do it.
Okay. Jay?
Well, I do think that they're both correct in that we should, as a town, be proud of our fiscal responsibility, being able to run the programs that we've needed to run, that we've been running on the budget that we have. With that being said, if there's a program that's underfunded or an innovative program that needs funding, I don't think that we should be afraid to spend more. We should just be responsible and cautious as we're doing it.
Rebuttals, any comments related to that? Okay, those are the formal questions that I have for this group. Now let's open it up to the audience.
So I've lived in Ashland about 8 years. It's very important to me to live in a community that is welcoming, that promotes diversity and inclusion, and I think all three of your boards play a major role in that. So what would you do as a member of your board to support those values here in Ashland?
Oh, don't go anywhere yet, because you have to pick the order of how they answer the question.
I'm going to cheat and just say, start with Mark and come this way.
That's not cheating, that's making a choice. Mark?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that's a great question, and honestly, it's something that we spent a good amount of time as a school committee talking about. We've started some programs where we're trying to improve our hiring practices to hire more staff that are among the highest qualified, but also more representative of our student population. I think that's certainly critical, that people of all races, colors, genders, et cetera, see people like them in leadership roles. So that's certainly one thing we're working on, and we'll continue to. I think the other component of that, and it's a little bit broader, but go back to the social emotional learning and sort of really helping people understand sort of their emotional aspects and how to look at other people that look like they're different than them and understand how to communicate more effectively and to appreciate differences rather than focus on them or treat them as negative points.
Thank you, Mark. Kathy?
I don't really think I could add more to what Mark said. But, I mean, we do talk about diversity and welcoming. We talked about the hiring practices. Our school superintendent is, in his administration, is very aware of that. So it is an ongoing thing that we do talk about.
Thank you, Kathy. Yolanda?
I think it's very important. We are a very welcoming and diverse, well, we're not a very diverse community, and we can certainly work on increasing our affordable housing to make it easier for people who want to come live in our community. I also think we can encourage everyone to participate who wants to participate and be welcoming to people of whatever background they are, to be part of town government, to volunteer on our boards, to come to meetings, to come into events and speak their mind. And I know myself and I know our board, we really encourage everybody and anybody to participate. And when we have committees that we're trying to fill, we say, come participate. And all we can do is continue doing that and welcoming as many people as possible.
Thank you, Yolanda. Jay?
Just to piggyback a little bit off of what Yolanda just said, because I agree with most of it, is not only trying to get diversity in people participating, but also creating more diversity in people running for these offices. The people in these offices have a significant amount of power in the town, and any diversity we can bring to these boards, I think, would be much helpful.
Thank you. Rob?
The only thing I would add is, you have to look at a diversity of housing types in town. And, Ashland actually has more diversity of housing than many of our surrounding towns. So we've got to continue that and put that in the housing production plan. I think also you want to look at things like your transportation system. How are we doing with the Metro West Regional Transit Authority? Is it meeting people's needs? How's commuter rail working? What's the alternative to cars? How do people from, say, Worcester or Boston get here? Can they get here reasonably and walk to work, or find a place to live here? So that's the kind of things I'd look at.
Thank you. Eric?
Agreeing with Rob, I think having differentiation in your housing stock is very important. Not everybody wants to have a 4-bedroom home on 1 acre of land, as well as different transportation options. But as a town, we should also be embracing different types of retail establishments, whether that be different ethnic restaurants or specialty shops. We shouldn't be afraid to welcome these niche stores into our community.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I'm Chuck Lids. I've been here just 4 years. So a number of the local towns are trying to commit to being 100% renewable energy for the government by 2030 and for the whole town by 2050. And I guess I would like to ask particularly of the select board whether they would endorse that, whether that's something we should have in our town plan, or whether that's not possible.
Okay, and you got three right in the middle. Who would you like to answer first?
Oh, let's start with Yolanda. She's
I certainly encourage renewable energy. I have not looked enough into the detail to see if we can do it by 2030. As a town, we are a green community, so we have already made some commitments about our town buildings as to how we're using certain kinds of energy. We have our solar at our high school, at our Mendez, at the House Street, so we're looking at ways to increase that. If there's a way to do wind, I don't know that that is. I think we need to continue looking at that. Whether I can personally say I would commit to 100%, I'd have to do a little more research, but certainly anything we can do to continue our use to do 100% renewable, I think is something we need to do as a town.
Jay.
That's absolutely something that I would support if I was lucky enough to be on the board. I actually wish it was something I didn't have to commit to. I wish it was already done. But as I said earlier, multiple car manufacturers have already pledged to be completely renewable lines by 2025, 2030. So for Ashland to be able to do the same thing seems completely feasible if these giant corporations can do that.
And Rob.
Sure, that's one of my, I think I identified earlier, one of the initiatives I'd like to work on. And we met with the, as chair of the select board, we brought the sustainability committee in about a month ago to talk about this, talk about a number of things, but one of the things I suggested, look very closely at the net zero initiative. And I'm not going to go into details now about how many years or whatever, but it's certainly something that's doable. I think one thing about, my generation is that we're kind of leaving future generations with this climate change problem. So we need to do a greenhouse gas inventory, I think as a first step, get both the municipal and then the public at large in Ashland, take on that kind of leadership, because as I said before, nationwide, the leadership is not doing it. So it's devolved to the states and to the local government where the rubber hits the road with us. And so I'd really like to get going on that. So thank you.
Okay, great. Next question.
Thank you. My question is for the school committee candidates. It's been really nice to hear a lot of talk about civic engagement. And one thing that I think is a component of that is a civics curriculum of some sort. I don't know if we have it, so I would like to know if we have it, and if we do, is it sufficient in your opinions? Do we need more? Is it something that you feel is important? Thank you.
Okay, who do you want to start?
Oh, Mark, of course.
Kathy's starting to feel left out. I'll be honest with you, Diane, I don't know how detailed the curriculum is in that area. I think it is something that is critically important. We should be raising our students to be actively involved members of their community, and certainly having people understand what civic engagement is, express their voice. We certainly know that many of our students expressed their voice back in March with some of the walkouts. And quite frankly, while you want kids in school, I don't know that any of us in the school committee were necessarily upset that they choose to express their voice, and they all did so respectfully and with great class. So we're pleased to see that. So I don't know how well embedded that is in the curriculum. That's kind of one of those questions that Kathy may know the answer better than I, but that I would probably go to our superintendent and say, Jim, what's the answer to that one?
Kathy, what's the answer to that one?
Here's the answer. No, here's the answer. No, we have had that talk a lot about civics. Yeah, and I don't know how extensive it is. I mean, we do support student voice. Mark gave the example of those walkouts. But it's very important to Jim Adams. He talks about it a lot. He talks about when he was a student, how important it was. He took, I think, like a full year course in civics. So I don't think it's too extensive. I don't think, but it is important, and we do talk about that a lot, that we think it's important that it should come back. So it's one of those summer workshop ones, too, that we talk about.
If I can add one thing to the question, and that is that there are a large number of students, particularly those in the National Honor Society, that do have a community service requirement that they have to fulfill, and they do it in all sorts of different ways. And I don't necessarily consider that to be part of the curriculum. That's part of that program. But that's another thing. You will see a lot of our high school students out there participating in different events and helping things run, volunteering their time at coaching clinics on sports and things like that.
In fact, last year, 2 of them came and served as tellers for town meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you all. Some really good responses tonight. Our annual town meeting, a big component of our town meeting is our charter review, our charter changes. And this is going to be for the Board of Selectmen, but I would entertain any response. I'd give Eric and Jay a pass on this one. You probably aren't that familiar with the process that's been going on for a couple of years. But I would ask the Board of Selectmen to reflect on particular changes that are being proposed that you feel are important, that you would want to focus on to the community, with one proviso that no mention of the ones that relate to the moderator. Okay, so you can discuss anything else.
That was going to be their first answer.
Right?
Yeah, really.
And so I will go Rob, Jay, and Yolanda, but I, again, open it up to the rest of the group.
Rob.
Sure, I thought there was some useful kind of, I would call housekeeping, made the recall process somewhat feasible. Before it was basically impossible. Now it could potentially happen. I thought their focus on the Board of Health was a little misplaced. I don't agree with that one. And making the Board of Health an appointed body. I think they would have, if you want to talk about appointed bodies, you would look at the assessors, or forgive me, the Board of Library Trustees, perhaps. But and I did like the defining about town employees and not running for office full-time if they're full-time. So I thought that was a good kind of measure. But so that's my basic impressions of the charter questions.
Thank you.
So I will admit that I am not as spun up on these particular issues as my counterparts here. I will say, though, that I think that any good elected official can admit when they don't know something, and rather than trying to makeshift their way through it to try to find a PG word, that they stop and acknowledge that, and they recognize that they can learn from others. And so I truly look forward to getting spun up on this issue in the future.
Yolanda.
I would agree with Rob. I think the recall process being looked at, changing of numbers, is important. It's, as a community, even though we want more civic engagement and we want people to be involved, we know what our turnout is and we know how many people come to the ballot. So the numbers that used to be required to do a recall they weren't going to be met, and I think that was a good process. I think the looking at selectmen and school committee on other committees, I think there was a lot of debate and discussion on that one. The other one, also with Rob, is the employees not being able to be on a board that they're working for. So if I'm, if I work for the town government, for the general side, I shouldn't be on the Board of Selectmen, and if I work in the schools, I should not be on the school committee. Now, for the school side, they already have that as part of their laws that govern school committees, but we don't have that for general government, so I think that's been a good thing. And I just look forward to everyone looking at all the changes that are going to be made, and be prepared for the discussion on May 8th.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michelle Brooks, and I actually serve on the Sustainability Committee in town. So I'm pleased to hear that there's some excitement and support around trying to transition the town to 100% renewables. However, I know personally that this is a big undertaking. I actually work for an environmental nonprofit that works with communities to make these transitions. And one of the biggest challenges that we face right now is that the committee is completely volunteer run. And ideally, we would need someone who is a designated sustainability coordinator or energy manager for the town to accomplish things like this. So I know that we had one in the past for a couple of years from the Green Communities Grant, and I'm wondering what the feasibility is and likelihood is of that potentially happening again within the budget.
And this is for Which group?
Oh, mainly selectmen.
And do you have, I know, but, and do you have an order that you prefer?
No.
Okay, well, you have to pick one anyway.
All right. We'll start with Yolanda.
I raised my hand. You're correct. We used to have an energy manager. He was part-time. He was paid for by a grant. And I'm going to sort of piggyback on the question that Chuck asked in regards to 100% renewable energy. And one of the rebuttals I was going to have is, as with any of these things, cost and having the money to do it can affect whether or not we can do it. I think if we really want to, go after that 100% renewable energy, we have to decide that that's something we're going to do, and we'd have to look at our budget moving forward to see if we can afford, or how can we put that in place if as a community that's really something we want to do.
Jay.
Provided that we could find proper funding for it, I would absolutely support that. I do think that, as I said earlier, committing to 100% renewable is something incredibly important for our town to do in the very coming future, very soon. And so if that's what we needed to do, then that's what we would try to do.
And Rob.
Thank you. So I think it's one of the things where you build up a constituency and advance the matter, and you see where you're at, and see if this is, if you build the case for it, and what else is happening, what are the other priorities, just like any budgeting process. So I think it's something that I would, thank you for bringing that up, Michelle, that question. That's kind of a tough one here, but, it's something I definitely consider, but I think we have to, push things along and see how they go, see what the exact needs are. Maybe it's something that, every department head could be responsible for their piece of it. Maybe there's some other things like that we could do. But as the case becomes clearer, I think it's something we should consider. So thank you.
Thank you. Yolanda?
It's not really a rebuttal, but I would just say.
Yeah, we'll call it a rebuttal.
Okay. I just want to say thank you for stepping up and being part of our sustainability, because you are the next generation that is going to be moving Ashland forward, and hopefully you will be staying here and keeping our town going. So thank you for that, and I would say encourage your friends to participate.
Thank you.
I guess there's one other question or comment that I would like to add, which is that in talking about development plans in town, and hearing a lot of you guys say that you are in favor of smart growth and really trying to make the community more sustainable, walkable, bikeable friendly, different things like that. I guess I'm wondering if there's a better way that our committee could be more involved and more helpful in that planning process. I am new to the committee. This is my first year on it, but it feels like there hasn't been a whole lot of collaboration or our involvement from our end in that process.
Let's talk to the planning board and the selectmen. Eric, why don't you start us off?
So I haven't served on the planning board yet, so I'm also new to this. But I would love to, on the Housing Authority, where I currently serve, I would love to incorporate sustainable features. I know we have spoken on the Housing Authority about solar energy in the past, and I think as a member of the planning board, if elected, I would love to include the sustainable committee in any plans.
Eric? Jay?
Thank you for bringing that up. As I said earlier, I think that one of the trademarks of any good elected official is being able to admit when they don't know something. And so you have much more knowledge, and your committee has much more knowledge about green energy and what we can do to move Ashland forward. And so I think it makes perfect sense that we would try to partner and work together to do everything we can to green up Ashland.
Rob?
Yeah, that's an interesting suggestion. I don't think we've really thought through the sustainability committee being involved with those kinds of planning and complete streets issues, but that's, it's a good idea. I think part of it is, what is your portfolio? What are you guys thinking about as your priorities, and how do you want to act those out? So I think we did do a complete streets kind of ad hoc group, which was traffic safety committee plus some other people, but that's probably, as we go to institutionalize that committee, probably, we could think about having sustainability committee members on there when you talk about, so to help with the coordination. So I think that's a good suggestion. And I think the other thing we're talking about is when are committees coming back to see us? So that's the other thing. I've been in touch with with Matt and Kyle about, when next they're coming back and what. So, I'd like to come to one of your meetings, maybe we could hash out but there should be a regular time when you're coming back to the selectmen and we're coordinating what's going on. So it's a good suggestion. Thanks.
And Yolanda.
A lot of things that happen here in Ashland, it's sort of organic in that people show up at a meeting and they give their ideas and that becomes part of the discussion. To Rob's point, I think as a sustainability committee, we certainly can incorporate you more. But I would also say if you see that there's something going on where there's discussion happening, we had our downtown forum. It would have been great, for sustainability committee members, and I think there were a few there, to be there and be part of the discussion and bring up things that say, well, okay, if we look at it this way, how can we go toward the goals of being a sustainable and a green community? And just be part. We are working on our comprehensive plan, and I know that Michael Herbert has been managing that. I don't know if there's any sustainability members on that group, but if not, as he brings it back together, it was sort of put on hiatus for some of the other initiatives that we've been working on. Go to those meetings, give your voice, and just be everywhere you feel is necessary until we can formalize this, but we definitely should formalize it a little bit more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Ooh, timekeeper has questions.
So I know one of the big topics in the past, we have lots of new ones this year, but in the past, residential growth and our ability to kind of sustain all town services, schools with that residential growth, that has been a big topic, and it's kind of fallen to the background, but I still think it is a bit of a concern with all kinds of issues that kind of surround every one of your boards. So I'm interested in your thoughts on kind of where we are now and where we're going and how you think you can help your board deal with those issues.
With regard to growth?
Growth, how, or do you think we're going to be maintaining, and or do you foresee additional growth, and then how are we going to handle that? I just know there's been a big concern. So is that something that you talk about on your boards, and where do you stand on that? And I'll start with Kathy.
Thanks. I'm going to hand it over to Mike. Do you want to answer? Well, that is a big concern of the schools, because as the residents grow, the services grow, and then we have to, we need to educate any children that come in. So, that's one good thing, one of the many good things between our collaboration between our superintendent and our town manager. They do have weekly meetings. They do discuss things like that. So that is a big concern.
Mark?
Yeah, I would echo Kathy's comments. Our enrollment has increased dramatically over the last several years. We are at a point where we have classes from kindergarten through 8th grade now with more than 200 in every class. That's never happened before. We have significant concerns about space in the Mendez School in particular. You're probably aware of the fact we put modulars on the back of the Warren School 3 years ago, I think it was, because of space. So it is a real concern. And one of the things that I think I'd love to see happen in terms of how projects are managed, if we can, is thinking a little bit about what Legacy Farms did. Right? There was an agreement in Hopkinton that if there were a certain amount of students that came from Legacy Farms over a certain amount, there would have to be a cash contribution to the town. I don't know all the details of that, and I don't think we have the land that would support a development that large. But those are the kind of things that I think we could think about in terms of how we manage growth to also help support the costs that go along with it.
Thank you. Eric?
All right, so Ashland's not quite built out, but we could get there. I know at town meeting, we're gonna be voting on the Valentine Estate, which potentially will preserve 26 acres from becoming more residential development. I would just love to keep doing things of that nature to try to keep the residential development down at the expense of paying more for services in the future.
Thanks. Rob?
Sure. Well, again, Eric mentioned the word build out, and that's one of the reasons that I ran for selectman 3 years ago. We're approaching build out, and it's just key critical questions now. How are we developing the remaining open pieces of land? How are we redeveloping places that we want to redevelop? And so some of the things that the board has got involved, we've commissioned a fiscal impact tool. Like every development that comes in, we look at what is the fiscal impact. And you'll see, and the Valentine Estate is a great example. This is going to be an expensive question, but the analysis is what is it going to cost us in the future to build 120 apartment units there, plus the adjoining land getting developed, and how will that cost us? So those are the kinds of things we're wrestling with on an ongoing basis and looking at that analysis. And so that's a great question, and that's one of the things that we're constantly looking at. So thank you.
Jay?
Would you mind just repeating the question for me one more time?
Yep, so it's in regards to the issue of having residential growth kind of feeling like it's spinning out of control and not being able to support with all the services that the town provides, schools, water, public safety, all the pieces that go along with it. So how do you think the board will be addressing this issue kind of upcoming?
Sure. So making sure that we have enough services and resources to go around for Ashland citizens already is obviously incredibly important. I'm cautious to say that we should limit residential production. We need to do it cautiously, but I don't want to stop Ashland growing.
Yolanda?
Well, it's always tough when you're the second person on a board who's answering, because Rob has mentioned some of the things that I was going to mention. So as he said, we now have a fiscal tool that allows us to look at, if a development is going in, what is the impact going to be for us? And I think as a board, we are working on looking at that build-out. The estimated build-out a couple of years ago was that we could get to about 22,000 people in this town. We're currently at about 17,500. And part of how we manage that, as other people have said, is looking at the open parcels that we have, whether or not we, allow them to be developed. And we work with developers, because one thing I believe is if a developer owns a piece of property, they have the right to develop that. So we have to work with them so that if they are developing it, how can we make sure that we're getting some more of our affordable, but also look at some of the redevelopment, because Ashland is very enticing. People want to be here. So how can we provide the housing without that impact, and try to find that balance between giving the housing, but also keeping the open space that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my question's really for the school committee, but I've been listening to the commentary tonight, and I was pleased that last question was directed at you folks, because really all of these things need to also go to you guys. When we're talking about smart growth and climate change and diversity, we have to be in the schools first. So, for instance, on the climate change and all of that, what are we doing with the school lunches? Are we composting? Are we still using plastic trays and all the things that, what are we doing? And I'm hoping that, there's some initiatives in the school. But my most important thing, and I'm hoping anybody can answer, but I'm really looking at you guys. I think our democracy is at real risk right now, because we can't tell the difference between what's real and what's fake. People really don't know what's real news, and people are only looking at the sources they want to. We all know this. I don't need to describe the problem. The answer has to be in our schools. So I'm begging, please, are you guys doing something? I want good news.
It's like the, $47 million question, if we can figure that one out. Marcia, I think it's a great point. As you say, I don't think anybody needs to describe the problem. It certainly is a point of discussion and a point of concern, I think, for the school committee, because the next generation need to kind of be able to behave themselves a little bit better than some of the people in Washington right now. I see how my children pick up on things, and they're coming up on 10 and 12, and certainly work very hard with them to make sure that even if they don't agree with somebody, that they try to express it in a respectful manner, and that they don't simplify things down to a tweet. Not that they're allowed to tweet, but In terms of what we do as a school district, what we really are trying to do is teach really important core values from K through 12, where students, I have 5 seconds, where students are really understanding how to communicate effectively with each other, and the positive behavioral intervention strategies program that really starts from kindergarten on up is about creating a culture that is positive for our kids because they're creating it that way. So, tough question. Thank you, Marcia.
You had my time, so.
Oh, use your time too.
Okay. Marcia, did you want to, anyone else who wants to take a shot at that, you're welcome to.
So first of all, for those of you who don't know, that was Marcia Rennie, who spent 9 years on our schools committee. So thank you, Marcia, for your efforts there, because that's very important. I know you were trying to go under the radar, but that doesn't work.
See, I was going to let you off the hook, Marcia.
Well, I had the fortune of spending some time with her on the school committee. I think it's important that we do it in our schools, but I also think it's community engagement and community discussion, and that we support and we make sure that whatever information we put out there, we know is factual and correct. And if we disagree with someone, that we model civic disagreement and understand that we can disagree with the person sitting next to us over some issues, but there are going to be issues that we're going to come together on. And showing that we can have that discussion in a civil manner, we can maybe come to a better discussion and a better result.
I actually wanted to add to that. It's one of the challenges that, Rob has mentioned that he posts on Facebook periodically, and he posts factual information. I'll post on Facebook periodically, and I try not to ever express an opinion. I try to be the guy who says, well, these are the facts. I'm not always there, and if it's an opinion, I'll be very clear about it. But it's amazing, no matter who's posting the facts, that people will just not recognize the fact. No, that's not the case. And I look at what we're going to be doing a week from Wednesday night, and it's beyond the question on adult use marijuana. I mean, it goes beyond that. But if you look at that particular issue, there's some very strong opinions. And how do we get 600 people in a room to maintain their composure and civil discourse? It's, along with the length of town meetings, the biggest challenge I face. And there's only one police chief, so I can only do so much in a night. It's a real big issue. And I think that, and I don't mean to take the candidate's time. Technically, I'm a candidate as well. Not technically, I actually am. But it's a huge issue. And I think talking about the students is one thing, but the problem is with the adults, not the kids. And I think we all need to look at how we're tweeting, how we're posting on Facebook, how we're having conversations with our friends and people we don't disagree with, and start with that. Look in the mirror first. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Fisher. I am a part of the Ashland Cannabis Education Committee, but I am here representing myself as an individual. I just wanted to bring up and ask your opinions on Jim Adams and his email, that he used his government email in response to the cannabis issue. This is not me asking about your opinions on the contents of the email, but the appropriateness of using the government email to put his opinion in instead of using his personal Facebook page, which other Board of Selectmen have done before. I'm just wondering about your opinions on just the appropriateness of using that platform of having every child's parents' email and using that government email to put out his opinion. And I'd like to start with Mark and then just work our way down.
So I'm actually not going to answer the question. To be perfectly honest with you, I think this is a candidates forum, and you're bringing what would amount to a complaint against the superintendent. So that really belongs with our school committee hat. If you have a concern about it, you can certainly contact our chair, but I don't think that's an appropriate question for this forum.
Kathy?
I'm going to agree with Mark.
Okay. Yolanda?
I'm torn. I feel that he sent it in the spirit of being the superintendent and the person completely responsible for our students. And unfortunately, I think it was put out on Facebook, and I don't know for sure. I don't know if he knew that that was done. I believe he sent an email to the parents of the students that he is responsible for.
I do want to be
And
clear that he did not post it on Facebook.
Correct.
A parent in the community transcribed the email and posted it to Facebook. So it was not the superintendent who did it. Sorry.
I will say that as a government employee myself, and also being involved in campaign politics here, I have to be incredibly careful about things I put in my personal email versus things I put in my government email. I even have to be careful about things I can say tonight because of ethics rules with my job. So if you're a government employee, you do need to take that very seriously as far as what ends up in official government emails.
Rob?
Yeah, I haven't seen the email, so I can't comment on it specifically, but I think there is, you have to be very aware, especially if you're an employee, about using government resources to get into a political arena. So I really, I'm not qualified to say much more than that, except that, we should be careful about. And I know in the past, the school has been very careful, and overrides Prop 2.5 overrides a great example. They just give out factual information using government resources. So hopefully that's what happened here, or will continue, or should have happened.
I'd agree with Rob. I haven't seen the content of this email or the Facebook post, but also echoing Jay, as a member of the Housing Authority and working with the Department of Conservation and Recreation, there are very strict guidelines in place for using company or government emails. So I would just hope that that's followed by the superintendent.
Jay?
I would just like to caveat my comment as well, that I haven't seen the email either. So.
Thank you for all your responses.
Thank you. Next question. Any further questions? Uh-oh, you guys are really in trouble now. I don't know what she's going to say.
So I understand that the cannabis issue is, really controversial. My question for everybody is, with the obvious safety issues aside, I look at this as a chance for our town, with our very small parcels left for commercial or industrial development, to actually get some tax dollars working in our favor finally, because we do not have the miracle mile of Route 9 or even some of the other areas that other towns are lucky enough to have. So we have to make do with what we have, and I look at that as a chance for us to be able to reap some rewards. And so that's what I want to know is, what do you think about that, and what would you use the money for?
Who would you like to start?
We'll start from the reverse and go this way.
Start with Mark.
So I think your question presumes that we're supporting having a recreational dispensary in town. I'm
going to just ask you to stop.
Okay.
Because
no, all right, and that's fine. Maybe I misunderstood.
okay, because I was going to say I just caution you when you use retail store, because dispensary implies medical, and I think one of the confusing things in this whole discussion, I don't mean just here, is people say dispensary mean medical, and other people think retail. So let's just use the word retail store if we're referring to retail, and if you're talking about medical, let's call it a dispensary, just for clarity.
Okay, thank you. So Kathy, maybe I can ask you to clarify. Was I on the right path, but with respect to retail?
I'm talking retail.
Okay. So see, I don't know the distinctions in terms of that terminology. And I'll say up front, just to be clear about it, I support the medicinal use. But I think the question presumes support for the development for retail purposes. And I'll say for me, I'm not sold. I still have concerns about the impact of marijuana. I think there are certainly studies that I've seen that suggest that there is a tie between marijuana use and anxiety and depression as people get older, particularly when it's used by our youth. I understand the law doesn't allow it to be used by our youth, but I still have enough concerns about whether this is a good idea for me to feel comfortable getting into sort of the second half of that question in terms of what would we use the money for.
And you would continue down the road?
So Kathy, just to be clear, so you're asking two questions. Are you asking if we support it or just what we would do with the money? Is that what you're asking? Oh. Well, again, well, I wouldn't want to surmise or try to guess what we would do with the money, but I'm just saying, you know, it's such a new thing for our state now that it's legal, the recreational part. I would just want to be really cautious about it before we move forward on it. So, and I don't really want to talk about what I would do with the money.
Yolanda?
It's a good question, but it's a tough question. And I think we're not sure, whatever happens after the vote, what the revenue would bring. So to have a full discussion and decide what we think we would do with that, I don't know that I've given it enough thought, or the board has given it enough thought, or even the town has given it enough thought as to what we would see as revenue. I would hope, you know, that whatever happens, whatever the will of the voters is, that once it happens one way or the other, we have a further discussion to figure out what we're going to do, if anything.
So as far as what we would do with the revenue, I don't have an exact answer. One thing that I've given thought to is trying to use that money to help fund addiction services more properly in the town. Also, I just want to bring this up again. I brought it up earlier at the cannabis meeting that happened last week. The individual who's trying to open up a dispensary in town informed us that if we banned recreational marijuana, he probably wouldn't open up the medicinal marijuana dispensary either, because he wouldn't be able to make enough money solely off of the medicinal marijuana. So banning one really bans both. So if we want revenue, we need to allow recreational as well, not just medicinal.
Rob?
Yeah, I think in terms of, one of the reasons the board adopted a go slow policy on the medical marijuana dispensary was, you know, this whole question of the opt-out and what's going to happen. And I think, you know, in terms of potential, and so we really don't know what's going to happen and what how the market's going to play out. So I think that's that's one of the things that, you know, one of the reasons why we were taking our time with this. How realistic it is, whether he really wouldn't do recreational, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure anyone knows. But, you know, in terms of potential uses for the money, I generally like to put things in general appropriation so and go through the budgeting process, but also, you know, there is a case to be made here for earmarking for various kinds of substance abuse possibilities. So.
And Eric?
So it's my understanding with the recreational law, the towns are going to be able to tax at a certain level up to, what is it, 7%? 3%? So I would like, echoing Rob's approach, putting that money into a general appropriations fund, or perhaps even letting the citizens of town vote on what they would want to see that money spent on during town meeting, giving the community a voice in the matter. Personally, I think having a recreational marijuana zoning in town would benefit the town. I don't really think there's too much difference between that and a package store in terms of damage to the community. So I fully support trying to bring recreational and medicinal marijuana into Ashland.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions? There's a whole section out here that hasn't asked a question tonight. I don't know. Do you want to ask another one? Remember, she left her list of questions home, so these are all come up on the spot.
That's right. So I've been sitting here admiring this brand-new monitor, thank you, that's behind all the candidates, and I'm wondering why we have monitors in the Board of Selectmen's room and they don't get used very often. So from an audience perspective, you're sitting there and they're talking about plans, or they're talking about, you know, all kinds of stuff. They're in front of the people sitting at that board, and the audience is clueless. You can't see, and when somebody is presenting something to you on those whiteboards, we get to look at the backs or sometimes the mistakes on the backs. So it would be awesome, and anybody have any ideas when we can start to implement that? Thank you.
Rob, take that. Sure. Yeah, and I think that goes back, I did mention something like that earlier when we're trying to be more transparent or at least let people see that the documents we're looking at. There are some logistical issues with that. Sometimes things can't be released, but most of the time, most of the stuff can be seen in real time as we're looking at it. So I think that's a great suggestion. I think it has to do with administrative capacity and, pragmatic reasons. How many documents can you get up there? We're doing, like we do the consent agenda that way, for example, so we could certainly expand that, and we've talked about that.
Either one of you want to take it, Jay?
So I can't speak as to why they haven't been using it. I haven't been on the board yet. But should I make it onto the board, I would be more than happy to try to make all of documents that can be released available to the public in any way possible, whether that be on monitors, online, whatever we can do to help make the Board of Selectmen more approachable to the public.
I can't see.
I can't quite read the sign, Allison.
We have 10 minutes left.
We have 10 minutes left, okay. So I know some of it is technical, whether or not we get it to either the computers that then attach to the screens, that then attach to WACA. Certainly something we have been trying to improve upon, and I would say that we try to improve more so that some of the things that we're looking at are more visible to the public. Because we know that we do have a lot of people watching those meetings, either via cable or live stream.
So it's time for closing statements. We'll go in reverse order from opening statements, and each candidate will have 1 minute left, and we have 10 minutes left, so we only get a minute. Mark.
Thank you. I will just close by saying I'm really proud of the progress that the school department has made over the last 3 years. I'm pleased to have been a part of that. I look forward to continuing to work with my fellow school committee members and the administration, with our goals being to expand elective opportunities, eliminate achievement gaps, maintaining positive relations with other boards as we've developed over the last 3 years, and hopefully finding a resolution to our problems with the Mendez building through the MSBA project, which will come up to the town meeting and then the voters, hopefully later in May. So I look forward to hopefully serving another 3 years unless there's a huge write-in campaign, but I certainly ask that everybody get out and vote, and I hope to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you to We Love Ashland and the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for sponsoring this forum. I feel honored to have been able to serve as selectman this past 3 years. It's a special opportunity. I've lived in this town since 1986, and Marcia and I have raised 4 children here. We've been very involved in our community during that time, and I hope to be able to continue to do that. I just like the opportunity to continue to some of the initiatives we've talked about today and some of the successes we've had over the past few years. So thank you for your support.
Thank you, Rob. Jay?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you to the friends and to everybody here and everybody watching at home later. I admittedly was a little bit nervous during my opening, so I skipped a few things. I've only lived in Ashland for a couple of years, but honestly, I kind of feel like Ashland's in my blood. I have family in Ashland, cousins that are in the room right now. Ashland was actually the first town that my grandparents lived in as a married couple when they first immigrated from Ireland. So going back decades, this town has meant a lot to my family. But if I'm so lucky as to be allowed onto the Board of Selectmen, I would do everything I can to listen to every voice and listen to every constituent and do everything that we can to help move Ashland forward.
Thank you, Jay. Yolande?
I also want to thank my fellow candidates. I think the discussion tonight has been very good. I want to thank the public for their questions and their participation in this event, and thank you to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library and We Love Ashland for organizing, and of course to Adam for moderating. I've been in town for just over 27 years. I've also raised my family here. I enjoy being a member of the Ashland Board of Selectmen and bringing my unique voice and the voice of the voters to the decisions I make. I think that I would ask that you consider Ashland is currently moving forward in a positive way, and that you consider the strong correlation to the members of the Board of Selectmen working with our town management, moving those projects forward. So I'd ask that as you go to the polls on May 15th, you consider voting for myself and keeping Ashland moving forward as it is.
Thank you, Yolanda. Eric?
So Yolanda has me beat by 1 year. I've been here 26. But I'm really impressed with the direction Ashland's going and all the projects that are on the docket. And if I am elected a member of the planning board, I would love to continue that progress that we've made through the Upper Charles Trail, protecting of open space, and other opportunities that's presented with the town. So when you guys go out, I would ask for you to vote for me on May 15th. And also thank you for WACA-TV. I know no one's called them out yet, so thought I'd include that.
Thank you. And Kathy, to finish it off.
All right, thank you again for hosting this forum and allowing the public to get a feel for who we are. I have really enjoyed working with the school committee, Superintendent Jim Adams, and with other town boards. I appreciate the collaborative relationships school committee's been developing over the years with the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and with our town manager, Michael Herbert. I am especially grateful for the collaborative effort between our superintendent and our town manager. It benefits the whole town. I look forward to continuing these relationships and serving the school district. Thank you. And thank you for all the thoughtful questions tonight.
Thank you, Kathy. That concludes our program for tonight. Thank you again to all the candidates for their participation this evening, to our sponsors, We Love Ashland, and the Friends of the Ashland Public Library, WACA-TV, the volunteers who made tonight possible, and the audience members here and watching at home. Now that you've heard from the candidates, the rest is up to you. Elections are on Tuesday, May 15th, and I urge everyone to get out and vote. I also encourage everyone to come out for town meeting, which starts next Wednesday, May 2nd, promptly at 7 p.m. at the high school. Good night.
Thank you.